The Riddler. If you were Batman, you'd wish all the criminals you chased left as many clues behind as the Riddler. But the Riddler is unique. Let's investigate how he has stayed in the game for so long. The Riddler has made a villainous career out of creating difficult scenarios for the Dark Knight to unravel. He is obsessive-compulsive about riddles, conundrums, perplexities, and puzzles. Unable to simply commit a crime, the Riddler has an inner need to announce his intended criminal activity in the form of a riddle or game. Always leaving clues for the Batman and Gotham City police, the Riddler has been foiled more easily than most of the other rogues of Gotham. Seemingly reformed, he now uses his brilliant intellect as a private detective. It was, however, a long road getting there. Born Edward Nashton, the boy who would become the Riddler loved games and puzzles. He showed great aptitude for figuring out the most difficult riddles and solving the most challenging puzzles from a very early age. Unlike many of the Batman's other enemies, Nashton didn't suffer a tortured childhood. He was smarter than his classmates, which earned him some resentment and occasional bullying, but he was not abused physically or emotionally in the ways some of his future colleagues were. Eddie's home life was quiet. He lived with his father, another person he considered intellectually inferior. Eddie started developing his penchant for riddles and puzzles as lies to his father. In school, Eddie was a bright student. He had a good relationship with his teachers, even though he knew he was smarter than them too. During one particular class, Eddie's teacher asked the students to put together a small jigsaw puzzle to see who could do it the fastest. Eddie badly wanted to win. He was competitive and loved winning more than anything. Although he could have quickly figured it out on his own, Eddie cheated. He completed the puzzle by finding the picture in the teacher's desk and photographing it. Eddie memorized the photographs and how the pieces fitted together in the finished jigsaw. He won the prize for completing the puzzle the fastest, which earned him the respect of the school bullies and the admiration of his peers. From then on, puzzles, which had always been an interest, became a lifelong exception. Ironically, knowing that he was smarter than his teachers, parents, and peers had a disastrous effect on Eddie's life. He rapidly lost interest in his schoolwork and stopped paying attention in class altogether. His grades suffered, and eventually he flunked out of school. But the boy was not sad about leaving school. Nevertheless, he was certain he would make a good life for himself. After all, he was smarter than everyone he knew. Edward Nashton left home a short time later. He joined with a popular carnival that was travelling around the country and was hired to be the show's puzzle master. He worked in a booth at the carnival as a barker, calling out to customers to step up and try his puzzles. However, much like his experience in school, Eddie cheated. He rigged the puzzles so no one could ever win. He made a small but reasonable living this way, utilizing his passion for puzzles and riddles. But as with the time in school, Eddie got bored with the carnival and soon abandoned that lifestyle for the more lucrative pastures of Gotham City. Edward Nashton headed for Gotham City, where he adopted the alias of Edward Nigma, a pun based on the word enigma, a riddle or mystery. Having discovered that shortcuts were easier than hard work, Eddie found himself heading down a slippery slope. Always smarter than the average person, Eddie was able to swindle others out of their money using riddles. This led him deeper into a life of crime. He started as a petty thief and had some success, but he wanted more. He realized that the big money was found in being one of Gotham's more colorful villains, like the Joker or Penguin. Eddie decided to create another alias for himself, the Riddler. Dressed in what would become his trademark green tights covered in question marks, the Riddler tried to build a successful criminal organization. He knew he was smarter than all of the other criminals in Gotham, but he lacked one important quality that they had: intimidating physical power. Also, Edward Nygma didn't anticipate the impact of the most important variable in his schemes, the Batman. Batman was just as smart, if not smarter, than the Riddler. He had a keen intellect that had refined as the world's greatest detective. But he was also much stronger physically. The Riddler never stood a chance against Batman in a fight, but beating Batman physically was never Riddler's goal. He wanted to best Batman intellectually, using puzzles and riddles. The Riddler began leaving clues in the forms of riddles for the Gotham City Police and Batman. He would tip them off to the scheme he was going to pull using a riddle. If they could figure it out, they would be able to stop him. Leaving such obvious clues for the world's greatest detective was not the smartest thing to do if one wanted to be a successful criminal. But for the Riddler, it was a compulsion. He needed to do it. In the early days of his career, the Riddler would often set traps for Batman and Robin. These tangled webs were modelled after the escape routines of one of Edward's childhood heroes, Harry Houdini. The dynamic duo were always able to escape the traps, of course, and capture the Riddler, sending him to Gotham City's home for the criminally insane, Arkham Asylum. During one encounter with Batman, the Riddler became possessed by the dark spirits of Gotham City's founders. He kidnapped children to lure out Batman and was nearly able to sacrifice the Dark Knight to these evil spirits that he himself had been consumed by. Batman escaped the sacrifice and put the Riddler back in Arkham, shocked at the level of darkness the usual humorous villain could achieve. Still wishing to become a top player in Gotham, the Riddler tried to put together a mob like the Joker and Penguin had. But no thugs were willing to sign on as the Riddler's henchmen, thanks to his silly gimmick of leaving riddles for the police and his reputation for losing to Batman. Most thugs thought inviting the police and, worse, Batman to the scene of the crime was insane and wanted no part of it. Riddler eventually found a pair of beautiful, deadly biker girls, blonde Deirdre Vance and brunette Nina Dramfino, who were willing to be his henchwomen. Skilled in many different fighting styles, they protected the Riddler, and they helped in his schemes under the names of Query and Echo, respectively. Hoping to expand his power, the Riddler set his sights outside of Gotham. He looked to places like Keystone City, Star City, Hub City, and many others. While none of these cities had Batman watching over them, they did have their own heroes. As a result, the Riddler found himself squaring off against Justice Leaguers like Elongated Man, The Question, The Flash, Green Arrow, and others. However, like Batman, these heroes were able to best the Riddler. They figured out his clues and defeated him in physical confrontations. Riddler would always end up back at Arkham. Yet, he was smart enough to hide the money he'd accrued during these excursions and amassed a substantial bank balance. He's made a fortune, but is never free long enough to enjoy it. The Riddler realized that it was his penchant for leaving clues that always resulted in his incarceration. After breaking out of Arkham, he decided that he would commit a crime and not leave a clue. But old, entrenched habits die hard. The Riddler left a clue yet again and was returned to the asylum. He went willingly back into his cell, believing that his inability to not leave clues and riddles was a sign of true insanity. He wanted to get help at Arkham, and hoped this time it would stick. A short time after his return to Arkham, the Riddler was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was assigned to Dr. Thomas Elliot, a talented surgeon who had also been a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne. Dr. Elliot tried treating Edward Nygma's cancer-ridden body, but was not having much success. It looked as though the Riddler would soon die. Nygma found a way to live, using a Lazarus pit, a pool of curing chemicals discovered and protected by terrorist leader Ra's al Ghul. A Lazarus pit could restore a person to perfect health, but only be used once. Ra's al Ghul was very protective of his Lazarus pits, killing any outsiders who dared to use them. The Riddler cleverly used one without Ra's knowledge and was cured of his cancer. In the insanity following his bath in the Lazarus pit, the Riddler pieced together the indisputable fact that Batman was actually billionaire Bruce Wayne. With this knowledge, which he shared with Thomas Elliot, Riddler planned to become the greatest villain in Gotham history. Elliot had hated Bruce Wayne since an incident in their youth where Bruce's father foiled Elliot's plans to kill his own parents. Since then, Elliot wanted to get revenge on Bruce. Learning that Bruce and Batman were one and the same, Elliot took on a villainous identity of his own, the bandage-wrapped killer named Hush. Hush and the Riddler set a plan in motion to destroy the Batman. They assembled an army of Gotham's greatest villains and manipulated them into attacking Batman. Everyone from the Joker to Killer Croc to Poison Ivy, and even the Superman played their parts. The Riddler was controlling the strings, whilst Hush set out to kill Batman. Batman defeated Hush and the Riddler. When he confronted the Riddler at Arkham, Riddler revealed he knew Batman was Bruce Wayne. Batman told Riddler that he knew he wouldn't expose his secret, because knowledge was power, and a riddle that everyone knows is worthless. Furthermore, the Batman promised to inform Ra's al Ghul that Riddler used his Lazarus pit if he told the secret. The Riddler realized he'd been beaten at his own game, and knew he could never reveal Batman's identity and live. A short time later, Hush, feeling betrayed, stalked Riddler and beat him nearly to death. The Riddler looked for refuge with the Joker and Penguin, promising the Joker that he would tell him his wife's killers. Joker hesitantly agreed to protect Riddler from Hush, but when it became too dangerous for him, he abandoned him. The Riddler was left without a friend in the world. Even Poison Ivy humiliated him in the aftermath of his deal with Hush. Alone and desperate, the Riddler found himself on the streets. He began having flashbacks to his youth, where he realized that he had, in fact, been physically beaten by his father. His father knew his son had cheated to get where he was, and punished him for lying. Through these flashbacks, Edward Nygma realized his compulsion for leaving clues and riddles was born out of a desperate desire to prove his innocence to his father. The Riddler got back on his feet and attempted a robbery in Star City, only to be apprehended by the Green Arrow. During the Arkham Asylum breakout, engineered by the Secret Society of Supervillains in Infinite Crisis, the Riddler escaped, but was later defeated by Shining Knight during the Society's attack on Metropolis. He suffered a head injury from Knight's mace, which put him into a coma for a year. When he finally regained consciousness, the Riddler had lost some of his short-term memory, including the knowledge of Batman's true identity. Coming out of the coma had an even greater effect on Edward Nygma than just his memory loss. It seemingly reformed him. The Riddler used his great fortune, secured through crime, to set himself up as a private detective. Nygma would use his great intellect to solve difficult cases for large sums of money. He even briefly partnered with former Justice Leaguer Mary Marvel to investigate Clayface. Mary had changed too. No longer the hero she once was, the Riddler urged her to give up the new evil ways, with little success. Not many people trust the Riddler's reformation, though he consistently tries to prove its veracity. How long will he last on the side of justice? That is the real riddle.